What if there are higher things that are available that we just aren't able to align with because we're still in a lower frequency range? And maybe, societally speaking, this whole kind of stubborn energy surrounding free will is to discourage us from really being free, from reclaiming our sovereignty, and to not be enslaved by all these matrix programs that tend to weigh us down and make us believe that we need to be part of a system that's not actually here to support our ultimate well-being. It seems like we tend to analyze these systems separately. The emotional body of consciousness, the mental body, and the physical subconscious aspect is something that cannot be controlled. That's what this whole debate comes down to. Can we actually control our reality? And if we feel we can't control our reality, what that means is that we can't really control ourselves. This is, I think, the biggest misconception and myth that the world wants to sell us on, that we don't have any control. That's the convenient truth to spread in mass. Because as soon as we feel powerless, we feel like we cannot control, we become slaves to a system, to the matrix, to any power structure, to the hierarchy at large. We start to feel like these little insignificant beings because we lack consciousness. We're told that we don't have free will. And I think, interestingly, that's why these beliefs are so widespread. That's why these debates and philosophers, they spread these kinds of ideas because they speak to the mass consensus or mass unconsciousness. It's like the shadow of human civilization, thinking that we don't have any control or any say in life itself, because there's so many elements that are definitely outside of our control that we can just observe. But what this really speaks to is, how are we in touch with our reality? Even if we believe this whole thing is a simulation or a video game, which obviously has a lot of elements that we cannot control, the question is, how do we actually choose to interact with reality? And we can really start to feel into that as a question of, where is our awareness? Where is our consciousness? If we feel like we're in the game, in the so-called simulation, feeling like we're just this little avatar, mindlessly interacting with what is, and the only thing we can do is just react to the reality at play, that makes us feel even more victimized, because those elements that come in, they could be people, triggering situations, global events. The only thing we can do then is to just respond to them. And that's a response that most people would say is subconscious in nature. We don't have free will over that because we didn't consciously choose the things that are coming in to evoke that reaction within our own physical being. But then that raises the question, which is, can we actually control our feelings? What do you guys think? I feel like most of us would say that we have an ability to control our feelings, but the paradoxical part is that most of us don't necessarily want to. We don't want to all the time. And that's a question that I urge all of you to think about, which is, do you feel like you are in control of your feeling state? Do you think there is choice in how you can feel? Or do you feel like feelings are just this part of this feedback loop of reality, wherein the input that comes in, which you can't control, causes you to feel a certain way, which is also outside of your control? This cause and effect relationship is just about how the brain interprets reality. And it's like being that avatar in a system, which is something you lack freedom in. And so that entire reality of feeling like you are just in a game, in a simulation, in which you can't actually control the elements at play, makes you feel like you are stuck, you are stagnated. I think we can reduce that and use that as a way to explain every kind of victim situation in reality. Every root of suffering, every root of perceived victimhood comes down to this feeling that you're in this game and there's nothing you can do about it. You didn't choose it, and the only thing you can feel into is the reaction, which is part of a cause that you didn't even consciously select. So obviously that is a trap, because there is no consciousness in this entire equation. Where's the aspect where you start to look at, maybe all these things happening to you are meant to evoke the choice in your reaction. And maybe when you choose to step into a different frame rate of your consciousness and you select a different reaction, your emotional state changes, thereby changing your frequency. And then you can actually start to perceive reality completely differently. In no way does the matrix reality that's commonly perpetuated evoke this kind of choice. Most people do not speak of the fact that you can actually break out of a certain feedback loop or change a pattern, because the programmed nature of the ego is such that there is no choice. Nothing is subject to change. And so what I saw in my post today, just talking about my personal belief and conclusion of all the probably hundreds of hours of analysis that I've done on this topic, is that everything is a choice. But a lot of people, they say that choice in and of itself is an illusion. Usually the people that are saying choice is an illusion are either extreme victims, they think that they're suffering, they think that they can't do anything to break out of that suffering, or They're people, interestingly, that seem to lack morality. It's a very interesting kind of a crossroads that I tend to observe, because the people that lack morality, they think that they can do anything they want, they can get away with that because there is no consequence to choosing whatever. Because in this game, clearly, because you can do anything, they can be quick to assume that that reaction comes with no side effect, no repercussion. And they're feeling into that because what that individual in a very egoic perspective is doing is just running away from a subconscious pattern, deeply embedded program in their minds that's telling them who they are, which is something they don't want to accept. And so if you're running away from some condition, be it, for example, that you do not feel worthy, or you do not feel like you are deserving of love, or you were not loved in your early childhood, what that can make you do is to shut down your own moral conscience. Once that pattern is there, everything appears to be a choice that you're making without any consequence. So there's no ethics, there's no morality. You're doing things just because you feel like doing that. And because those people don't want to assume responsibility for what they're choosing, and they also don't want to take any judgment for the things that they're causing in other people's lives, they're quick to assume and to spread the notion that there's no free will. And if they're, let's say, perpetuating abuse or harm for other people, they're also quick to say, you're choosing that, but in reality, everything is predetermined. So this comes down to a very multifaceted topic, of course, which is like, are the people that are spreading the most abuse, harm, disillusionment in society, do they have the free will, or are they doing this completely unconsciously? I think the way that we can really analyze this from above is just by seeing what is running the simulation of those individuals. Are they living through the egoic perspective, or are they actually soulfully balanced? Do they have a sense of morality, or are they deeply wounded people to the point that they don't even understand they have a choice to act differently? They can choose to be virtuous. They can choose to break out of their own loop of suffering and choose to align with self-love, because that's the ultimate choice. Back to the point of, are we living more from the headspace or from the heart? That's a choice that's super subtle. Many of us don't realize we can actually make the decision to move out of this mental state, out of the feedback loop of more suffering that we cause to ourselves by choosing to stay victimized due to the past program, which makes us feel like we can't even choose higher possibilities. But that's the illusion. So we can really break it down to, what are the main programs that are running our lives? Are these things that are negative in nature, or are these things that we feel are up to us? Because of course we can't change the external reality, but we can change the way that we feel about it. Victimhood changes as soon as we realize there's a belief that we're choosing to still maintain. And so it's all very nuanced. We can ask ourselves, why do we still want to believe that we have to perpetuate a certain program? Why is it that we are subordinate to these certain negative beliefs? Because the more we go into it, the more we realize there actually is freedom, and there is a decision we're making every single time we choose to uphold that negative belief. It's something we're still choosing to play out in our minds because we're ultimately wanting to believe it. So there's an energetic investment every single day that goes on that we choose to maintain that program. And we can actually feel into that typically, because if you know that there's something you believe in which is devaluing you, maybe you're lacking self-respect, or you're choosing not to defend your self-worth, maybe you're still living in fear, you're choosing not to make certain higher decisions, you're probably faced with many micro decisions. For example, you get a gut feeling that's telling you, like, make a new choice. There's something better in store for you. Listen to your intuition. Maybe your heart wants that freedom. Maybe you know there's a higher possibility in store for you. But you're still afraid of making that decision because a part of your ego is drawing you back into that mode of contraction, telling you you can't make that choice. And maybe that's when that internal critic comes back in, a certain narrative starts to shape your mentality, and you feel like you can't do anything about it. But if you really zoom all the way in, that's your consciousness in the middle. It's the intermediary, and it's deciding, what does it want to align with? Do you want to give yourself to that past pattern, or do you want to see that little moment in between as a potential bridge that you make to align with a new outcome? That's where your freedom lies. So the question is really, is the avatar fixed? You as a human being, are you somebody that's just living out past programs, past patterns? Are you just inheriting generational trauma and karma, which is really what those people that are not in support of free will are arguing, that you are just a continuation of your genetic program. But of course, as many of us know, and as we've talked about before, epigenetics is a thing. And people that disprove the generational programs are the ones that tend to be most successful, most happy, and most in control of their reality. But that aspect where we're in control, it again comes down to, are we in control of The decision-making process where we choose to be conscious human beings, balanced, or are we choosing to revolt against the things that we felt not in control of in the past? Are we living morally? Are we living in a way that evokes justice and power and peace? Or are we choosing to just be in that kind of Luciferian mindset, which is we can do whatever we want without any consequences, because that is also a possibility in the Matrix. The point is, I think most of us can feel into the nature of the Matrix is super fluid. It's like whatever you choose to attach to or conform to in your mind will be proven externally speaking. So then that brings us to the point of what do we really want to be experiencing? And do we think that that is up to us? Many of us that are even having this kind of internal dialogue, we realize we need to make a certain choice. And that's something that we need to reevaluate based on our past decisions and what we think is available to us. What if there are higher things that are available that we just aren't able to align with because we're still in a lower frequency range? Maybe that's the conditioning basis. And maybe, societally speaking, this whole kind of stubborn energy surrounding free will is to discourage us from really being free, from reclaiming our sovereignty, from choosing to be divine vessels of consciousness, and to not be enslaved by all these matrix programs that tend to weigh us down and make us believe that we need to be part of a system that's not actually here to support our ultimate well-being.